Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Caregivers. Um, it's always exciting to me for Tuesday to roll around because we get to visit with one another, and that's an awesome thing. We got a great guest today, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode as just like the rest that you've been watching. Um, I always try to start these shows with a little bit of something sort of personal. Um, And given the times that we're living in, and it gets harder, it seems like every day, um, to make sense of what's going on in this world and how it's personally affecting all of us, our families, our work, our emotional well being. I caught myself a couple of days ago on a virtual call with multiple people becoming very frustrated and I guess even agitated at a particular person on the call for what I thought was inappropriate, maybe um, behavior, wasting time, just fooling around when everybody was so busy and we'd all already had multiple Zoom calls that day and we're tired. Um, and then, afterwards I had to kind of think, why are you reacting like that tonight when this is who this person is. I mean, that's kind of always the way it is, and it hasn't gotten to you like this before. And then yesterday, another marathon of virtual calls all day long, and no time to really do anything. None of the action that needed to happen because of those calls becomes frustrating with the amount of time that we spend on calls. We can't get our work done. And my daughter, again, she's has Down syndrome. She's an adult, and she came in and she was trying to get my attention and trying to get my attention through a call with what I just could not move away from. And so when it was finally over, I went in and I said, and I didn't say it nice. I just fussed at her for interfering and that she's just going to have to control herself better. Well, last night she came to me and she said, "Mom, I saw we." Oh boy, I have to look at myself. And I think we all do once in a while. Um, and so I did some soul searching last night. And when I was looking for what cup I was going to use today, I found one that I thought was really appropriate. And it talks about, let me get it up here so you can see it. The days are long, but the years are short. You see it? I'm going the wrong way. Days are long, but the years are short. And when you drink from this cup, what you see on the inside is this choose joy. Well, that's what I'm going to do, okay? I'm going to do that. And as I was thinking this through about how am I going to practice that? What am I going to do to help me remind myself that I want to practice joy and I want to be more patient and tolerant and accepting of everybody who's feeling the same stresses that I am. And shame on me for judging somebody else who's feeling the same way I am when I am acting out, right? So I thought about something that I had seen a long time ago. I went into my file and I pulled it out, and it's called Practice the Pause. And I hope you've seen it before or heard it before. If not, it's so short, I'm going to read it to you. So practice the pause. Pause before judging. Pause before assuming. Pause before accusing. Pause whenever you're about to react harshly. And you'll avoid doing and saying things you'll later regret. So I hope that helps in some way. And maybe you're not feeling like I am, but it just gets a little bit more every day that I just feel like, I'm just out of kilter. And that's not fair to take that out on other people. It's not fair to myself to harbor any of those kinds of feelings inside because it just takes energy that I need to do the work that I want to be doing, right? And the work that I love to do. And so I hope this will be helpful to all of you. So again, choose joy. Now for the best part of the show. I get to introduce our guest. Our guest today is Christine James Brown. And Chris is the CWLA president and CEO. For anyone who might not know what CWLA stands for, it's Child Welfare League of America. So welcome, Chris. How are you?
Thank you, Irene. And thank you for that story. I think all of us are at that point in this very, very long journey through the pandemic that we find that our fuses are a little bit shorter, and whether it's with our family or our colleagues, we tend not to always react the way we want to. And I thank you so much for sharing that, because it made me feel a little bit better about the last few times I've been a little shorter than others. And it may be with the same person, who knows? But I find that I am not always reacting the way I want to and should. So I'm going to remember that, I think just one other thing real quick. When you think about all the things that we do, you and I have done, and I'm sure all of your listeners have done, when we're looking for joy, it's to be with others, it's to hold their hands and give them a hug. And we just can't do that. So we're going to have to figure out, and Zoom just doesn't get it, right? It's not quite enough. I've had my granddaughter's birthday party on Zoom, and, it's just not enough. So I think just keep, pressing on and thinking about creative ways maybe to have joy and to share joy. I think it's important.
I agree. So tell us a little bit about yourself and about your cups.
So I'm going to start with my cup. I have one cup that I use all the time. And if you see what it says, but first coffee, because I can barely get myself out of bed in the morning without a cup of coffee. But when you ask me about my favorite cup, it's really this one. And I'll tell you why. I spent most of my career, over 20 years, running the United Way in southeastern Pennsylvania, which is also my hometown. And so much of my perspective and who I was shaped by being in that one community. I was very unusual to be the CEO of a United Way in my own hometown. Usually the pattern is that you move around to at least 7 United Ways before you become the CEO of a United Way. So the fact that I was able to do it in my town and work my way up, I'm tremendously grateful for. But it all also, though, kind of closed my world down a little bit. Although I traveled a lot for the United Way, I didn't travel enough. And my background's in anthropology, and I've always longed to go out and learn about other cultures more. And I was asked to become the CEO of the United Way International. And in that capacity, I was able to travel to about 45 countries on a pretty regular basis. And one of the countries that I loved most was South Africa. And the oldest United Way outside of the United States was in South Africa, in Cape Town. And I got this cup there. And why their significance now is that it wasn't until I started that travel that I was able to have a different perspective of the world. It wasn't just a closed Philadelphia perspective, but it was a perspective of the whole world. And in the middle of all of this, I find myself having to lift up to think, okay, we're part of a world that's going through something, and it's a big thing, and it's going to be over long. Don't get caught up in the day to day. Think more globally, think more broadly in time about what we're going through, and it will help us, I think, a little bit. So this cup is a good reminder of the need to think about the time I spent in Cape Town and the joy that it brought me, and the fact that it gave me a very, very different perspective on what I needed to do when I came back and transitioned to CWLA, and started to really work at the national level around issues related to children and families.
Right. Well, that's a great overview of your background. CWLA is certainly blessed, been blessed by you. And I've personally been blessed by you on many occasions.
Well, our
Anyway,
friendship is very important to me, and you know that. For all of you listening, Irene is always on the case, making sure we don't forget you all and your causes and your strengths. And I am so grateful to her for that because I come from a strength-based background, and the reminder of the strengths that you all bring to our children, to our community is just, a fundamental part of who we need to be. And Irene is always right there, making sure that we don't forget. So thank you, Irene, for that.
well, I've been called the squeaky wheel before,
Well,
so
what can I say? I like to,
it is what it is.
yeah.
Well, we talked a little bit about how COVID-19 is making a difference. And you wrote an article, it was in April, I believe,
Mhm.
that struck me as one that when I read it, I thought, you know what, when we start Coffee with Caregivers up again in August, I want to have Christine on to talk about this whole topic. And that's kind of what spurred me to get you on so early in August, because I think your ability to sort through things and maybe see the global picture, like you just talked about, gives you perspective that I don't hear every day from leaders right now. It's more about right now, tomorrow, right now. And all of that is incredibly important. But the really quick right now fixes that seem to be coming sometimes turn out to be probably not the fixes that are going to be beneficial for the long run. So your perspective is one that I value very much. And before we get into that, I did want to say one more thing that I think people might be interested in is there wouldn't be an NFPA if there wasn't a CWLA. And I think it's an interesting story. CWLA is 100 years old today and this year. So kudos to CWLA and the magnificent work that's done over all that 100 years. 50 years into that, some folks at the Children's Bureau were talking about how the foster families in the United States had no advocacy. There was no group, anybody that advocated for them on a national level, like there were for other people. So they approached CWLA with a $10,000 grant, as I understand it, and over a 3-year period of time, CWLA took the lead in working certainly with someone from the Children's Bureau as well to figure out what would such a national organization look like, what would be the particulars of it, what all has to happen in order to get it established, to get it 501c3, all those kinds of things. And actually held a conference in 1971 in Chicago where it was all formulated and put together, and some new leaders were identified, foster parent leaders, to take this organization forward. And so, as we move forward 50 years, the second 50 years for CWLA and the first 50 for NFPA, we're both celebrating really significant
Milestone.
history
Mhm.
and celebrating, I think, what we see for the future at the same time. And I know that y'all are doing that as are we.
Mhm.
We learn from the past, and hopefully the things we learn in the future are wise decisions based on where the past was and where it's taken us so far. But I think it's important for people to know that there's been a connection between CWLA and NFPA for the last 50 years. Christine and I have, I think, made that connection much closer
Mhm.
in the last 10 years or so than it had been before. And so I think that's something that we're both very proud about because I think it's really helping caregivers and the foster care system.
And we're stronger as a result. I think that that's important to emphasize that I really do come from the philosophy that our field needs to be led much more by the parents and by the young people who come into contact with the child welfare system. And so your existence as an independent, powerful organization, individual is extremely important to our success. So and you mentioned the fact that there are no quick fixes. Um, I really honestly believe that to get things right, we have to really drill way down and reinvent from the bottom up. And that means listening to families, listening to resource parents, listening to everyone who is a key stakeholder in making sure that children have everything that they need to succeed.
Right.
And some of they're like hidden places you need to look. You know, how are we funded? How are we structured? What kind of people do we recruit to be resource parents? How much do we listen to them and respond to their interests and their needs? There's just so much work to be done. I think this pandemic combined with the racial unrest, and I don't think that you can separate them too much, has challenged all of us to rethink how we got to where we are. And I know as an African American woman who grew up in the 70s and 60s and 70s, I experienced a lot of racism as a young woman. I heard a lot from my parents about it, and I always questioned them. Why did you let them make you sit in the balcony? And how dare you do that? And I think I had to sit still for a while in the beginning of all this before I wrote that to say, how did we get here? How did I get here? Why haven't I been more vocal about the inequities that exist for so many reasons in our, and it's not just race. The inequities can be geographic, they can be so many inequities that are putting families and children at risk every single day. You know, I think about what's happening now in rural areas that thought they had escaped the pandemic. And not only are they being hit by it, but they're hit by it with at the same time that their hospitals have closed. You know, the infrastructure that they had to support them and help them come back from it is gone. So I think this is a time in our country, in our system and others, to sit quietly and say, how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we listen to the right voices? How can we be partners with communities rather than people that come into communities and are viewed as the enemy? It's gonna take a long time. That's not an easy thing to do, I don't think.
I agree. I think that I'm going to give the title of your article. I'm assuming that if somebody would want to read that, they could go to your website or not. Would it
I'm
be
gonna
available?
just send it to you and you can send it out. And
Okay, we'll put it on our Facebook page.
there's been both that article, but there's also a couple of other things that have come out recently that you may not even have seen yet. So the one article is really about us as a country playing whack-a-ball, if you will, with different systems. You know, we're outraged with the police, as we should be for the bad behavior that some police officers display. And then we're outraged with child welfare, and then we're outraged with the healthcare system. The reality is that all of these systems were built on a foundation of inequity in a country that's not done what it needs to do to address poverty. I mean, I spent almost 3 years on the National Academy's committee to look at how to reduce poverty by 50% in 10 years. And I was appalled by how poorly we compare to Canada and to other countries, the UK, that have really addressed child poverty with child allowances and an extreme version beyond what we have of earned income tax credits. And I was even more appalled by how little research we've done to understand what does and does not work. Um, and so I think that we are at a point where we can look back, as you mentioned. There have been lots of initiatives over the years that we just threw up, got some success, and then walked away from.
Right.
We can go back and look at them and see, you know, think of um, family settlements. Think of settlement houses. You know, some of you may be old enough as I am to know when settlement houses were at their peak. They were places and communities that people could come to and get supports. Families depended on them. And now we have, and then they disappeared, and now we have a new idea. What do they call family resource centers now? And then we'll have another idea. We need to pull all this information together and say what worked, what didn't work, and how can we take what does work for families and young people and move it forward in a different way. I'm hoping that that's what we're going to do. I don't want us to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I want us to keep thinking about what we've already done and how it can be reinvented and made to work in today's world.
You know, you bring it's just an excellent point, because I've caught myself saying the same thing over the last, gosh, I've been doing this work for about 45 years now. And like you, I've seen a lot of things come
and go
and go away.
Yeah.
And it's like we have all these great ideas and we work hard to implement, and people think they were implemented, and then you blink your eye and it all went away.
Yeah.
And we were right back to where we were before the great idea. And then the next thing happens, and we work really hard to implement, and there's all this review. Is it working? Did it get implemented? And everybody says yes, 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 because they have a state policy or a federal policy says it's going to happen. But then if you get down to where the rubber hits the road, nobody even heard of it yet.
Right.
I mean, and yet we think, oh, it's done. Everybody on the top says it's okay, it's been done. No, it hasn't, because if you go down to that worker or the foster parent, they're going to tell you, no, I never even heard of that one before. You mean that's a policy I'm supposed to be doing? And so we wonder then, why didn't things get better every time?
Yeah.
It's because change is hard, and it takes a long time to make it happen.
And a lot of places, and not in just one political, environment. I think that the whole notion of how you integrate policies into how you do your work is so critically important. People have to understand why they should do things in a certain way, not just have a new flavor of the month, but why that flavor, how it relates to them, how it relates to the families. They have to be held accountable. So it has to get integrated into who you hire, how you hire, and how they're held accountable for the work they're doing. So you don't just say, here's a new policy, everybody go do it. You have to think about those points in organizations where things happen or don't. So I'll give you a quick example. When I was with the United Way, we had undesignated money that went to community issues, and we had designated money. And we were really trying to get people to give more undesignated money so we could fill the gaps in the community that existed. And when I started to look at it, if you were going to be recognized for making a donation to the United Way, you got the same recognition, whether you gave a designated or undesignated gift. If you gave a designated gift, you got thanked by the United Way and by the group that was designated. So it already diminished, the power of an undesignated gift. If you were going to put your, so any recognition you got, any accountability for the staff was exactly the same. I really worked hard to say, okay, if you give an undesignated gift and we think it's better, we're going to let you put 3 tickets into the pot to get a prize. And if the staff gets people to give undesignated gifts, they'll get a higher evaluation than lower. So you have to look at human behavior and what drives human behavior. And believe it or not, how many tickets you get in a raffle drives human behavior. Whether we like to think about that or not. So we have to really think what drives human behavior in the field of child welfare that we can influence in the right direction, for better services for children and families. And we have to recruit against it. We have to recognize and acknowledge people against it. And we have to be accountable against it. We have to be accountable for those things that we want to see that are positive, or we're not going to get anywhere. It'll be another flavor of the month.
That's right. Well, I think that, there's so much work that's being done by CWLA and other national partners with members of Congress with the federal agencies that oversee the components of foster care system, with the leadership in all of those, that, I always keep thinking, well, we're gonna see more effective change.
Yeah.
We're going
Yeah.
to see more sustainable change. We're going to see that people are being held accountable for longer periods of time, that it doesn't just get dropped because the energy's all gone and the next new thing has to be addressed, which again seems to be how
Yeah.
things work in this
But what you're
country.
saying, Irene, I think there's two things about what you said. One is partnership, that there's too much people going at things on their own, which creates confusion among the congressional leaders. So I think really trying to work hard to do things in partnership with one voice and in common. And we've tried to do that, throughout our work together as organizations, that there should be a common voice. Doesn't mean it has to be all the time. Sometimes you're out there doing something separate, but
Sure.
over the major things. And then secondly,
There's power in
there's
numbers.
power in numbers.
So
And
let's
there's
say when
confusion.
John and Shaquita go to talk to somebody in Congress and they say, here's all the national partners
Right,
who are in agreement with us.
right,
That's powerful,
right.
more powerful than NFPA
Yeah,
going and saying, our members believe in this, but I don't know about all the rest of
right.
those. I mean, it
It
magnifies our
magnifies it.
ability to be influential, even when we're a small organization and compared
But
to many.
I will give you another example of that. We are only as powerful as the voices we represent and the knowledge we have. So we've been working around the stimulus package and how money comes out. And it was only because of you and others that we were helped to understand that foster parents who took a child in after they filled out their taxes were not going to be eligible in the same way, right? And we would not have known it except for communication, and Congress, frankly, wouldn't have known it. So we've been able to take that. It's a tiny example, but it's based on a partnership, number one, and your willingness to say to us, here's something that we've identified as an issue. So it really speaks to we need to stay in good communication. We need to look under every rock for something that we can change. I mean, we did that a lot with the Affordable Care Act, as you know, to
Right.
really say, how can we make sure that this Affordable Care Act is the right thing for um, families and foster families and youth in care? And we had to do a lot of kind of massaging to make that happen. So it all speaks to the requirement to do what I think is the most responsible thing for CWLA to do, which is listen and share, have the right partners at the table and listen to what they say and be responsive to it. And in the one positive thing from this virtual world that we're in is we've been able to bring members with us to congressional meetings, and they have taken over the meetings with their stories of what they see on the ground way better than John or Shaquita, who are our key policy people, way better than they can, speak to it. We were able to get CBS to do a special report on child welfare workers as first responders. I had talked to them for probably 3 hours, and I got them close. But I then got them to agree to include about five of our member agencies in a meeting. That pushed them way over because the member agencies could tell them stories about what workers were going through, what foster parents were going through, and what the families that they were serving were going through. So I think the one thing that for me is going to make or break our ability to be successful going forward is the partnerships we form and the voices that we can lift up. For us, that's our credibility. We are just another group wandering on the hill, trying to make things happen without it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's one phone call from, it was actually in this, what you were talking about, one phone call from one of our members
Right.
in Florida actually about, well, what do foster parents do when they get
Right.
stimulus money and they don't have those kids anymore? What do
Right.
we do? Oh, we can, and so, here I go and contact John and well, I don't know if anybody ever talked about that. It gets us in touch with the committee who did the whole thing, and they hadn't thought about it.
Right.
And
Right.
then we found out that it was affecting parents who had gotten their kids back but didn't get the stimulus, right? I mean, all kinds of situations
All kinds of other things. Yep.
that nobody anticipated,
Right.
which is often what happens in these kind of quickly put together things.
Right.
And so, you know, it was like, wow, we started this whole discussion now that the feds have to come up with, and I think it's the IRS is supposed to come up with a solution now.
Right.
But somebody had to start the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's why our members are so important to us, because we don't hear from them. We don't know what
Right.
they want us to say when we go in our partnerships with y'all.
Right.
And the other organizations. So it's just a process that we need everybody from the ground level up to really understand that they have the ability to influence big things with one phone call.
Right. I mean, it's kind of telling people to vote, you know, that your one voice is going to make a huge difference. I mean, that you're sharing that with John is going to impact thousands of people across the country, you know? So we, you know, the smallest thing, you'd say, well, that may sound selfish for me to bring that up. It's probably not, right? It's probably something you need to bring up and see where we can go with it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I'm always appreciative to that member that made that phone call. You know?
Yep.
Otherwise, it wouldn't have, I don't know when it would have surfaced.
Exactly.
And maybe not with us.
At all. Yeah.
At all, right. So I know that y'all have been doing a lot of things, and just briefly, because I think our time is about up, but let's talk just a little bit about some of the other things that CWLA is doing that any of our viewers, like your webinars and things like that, how to find out about them, what's kind of being available. I know I just did one with a panel, 2 weeks ago now. Loved that work group. And very relevant to our viewers for sure, as are almost all the webinars that I've seen so far. So you do that. I know you have a virtual conference coming up in October, if you want to just mention that briefly. And maybe a few words about the commission that y'all have and kind of what you're looking at for the future, right quick.
Okay, so let's kind of grab it up real fast and say, first of all, please go to our website so that you can have access to the information that Irene is mentioning. We have our priorities over the next 12 months have to do with addressing racial justice, making sure that we're in a just, equitable child welfare system. We've established a committee to help us with that. Our conference, October 6th through 8th, is focused on that. We're going to be learning from the field, learning what's going on. We're going to be listening to people with lived experience to understand what we can do better to address that issue. Our second and related to that, we're also issuing a number of requests for people to write essays, because we're learning from those essays. We have a special issue of our peer-reviewed academic journal on the topic, but we're also doing the journal on child poverty and its connection to child welfare, and on the social indicators of health and their connection. So go to our website to keep on top of them. The webinars, we made a commitment. We have these open mic sessions with members, and we said that we want to turn around within a couple of weeks. If we have a major problem that members mentioned, we're going to do a webinar. So there's some really extraordinary ones coming up. There's also going to be a series of webinars that form the foundation for our virtual conference, because you can't get everything done at a virtual conference. So there's going to be 10 webinars prior to the conference. And then after the conference, we're going to form small groups to come together and talk about what they learned and what can we as foster parents do, what can we as young people do to really address this issue of equity in the field. And then the other thing I just want to mention is we're going to have a real sharp advocacy focus on states. The fact that the states are going to be so low on revenue, we want to make sure that we maximize, because remember, child welfare is federally funded and state funded. Not, in some states, much more from the state. So we really need to make sure we have a strong focus on that. And then finally, specific to this group, we're rethinking how we organize and deliver our foster parent training. Because it has, we're not able to go in person and do things anymore. So I think the short answer, go to the website, CWLA.org. The webinars are all free. And for any you missed, they go online and you can access them.
Right.
Did I make it?
Yes, ma'am, you did. And it's a good thing your website has got an easy
Yeah. Yeah.
Address. So CWLA.org it is on the screen, and a wealth of information there, and lots of exciting stuff coming up. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that. Well, I think we're done for the day, Christine. And again, thank you so much for taking the time in your really busy schedule to spend with us. Truly appreciate you and the work that you do, and the work that CWLA does. And
Right
even
back at you.
your,
Right back at you. Thank you for your work.
your openness to
And to
partner
your
with
listeners,
us.
let me say that. Thank you so much for the care and concern that you've shown, especially during this pandemic. It's been just extraordinary.
Well, you're welcome. So that's another episode of Coffee with Caregivers, and I hope to see you next week.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with our friends at United Healthcare. For more information about United Healthcare, please visit www.uhc.com.